waiting for the speaker, Kagoro, who is coming via video to speak to us about how we can learn from African villages. Just give it a second. I think the technical team is trying to get that up and running. In the meantime, what are you learning? What are you hearing? I love the conversations that have been going on the Discuss panel, and especially when the free trade area conversation was happening. I want to hear what you're hearing. I want to hear what you're learning. Share that with us. I don't know if the tech team can tell us if you're ready to run.
Brian Tamuka Kagoro. I'm a recovering lawyer, international economic relations lawyer, but I am a practicing Pan-Africanist. I wake up every morning trying to find solutions to Africa's development challenges and opportunities. The key strengths of African villages are relationship, shared vision, shared values, and co-created solutions. And if you think about a village as a space or a place that's physical, that's spiritual, that's cultural, that's intellectual, social, or economic, you'll realize that what drives the relationship in each village, and you see, you have to remember that our villages did not have courts of law, did not have constables or police officers running around, did not have these complex written constitutions, yet there was a measure of order, there was a measure of mutuality and of humanity. It's because the idea of shared wealth or shared outcome and shared values drives our villages. And the second thing that we have to remember that in terms of production in the village, the production was always outcome focused. It was dialogic, right? It was not individualistic. It was collaborative. And that it was also actuated by a sense of equitable distribution. So this shared contribution to creating shared wealth, but it was sustainable. Whether you're looking at sharecropping, the way we dealt with livestock, the way we dealt with crops, even in pastoralist communities, right? It was earth-friendly. And then there was a component of mentorship. We didn't have big schools where we took people to train them. You were trained on the job. You became an artisan. You learned to rear sheep. You learned to raise goats. You learned skills that people are struggling nowadays to transfer. So this idea of mentorship and transference of skills, it was intergenerational. The three key principles that you take away that are critical for anyone in business from a village are crowd-based solutions work best. That idea of a partnership, which is based on, I said, shared values, mutual accountability, and a sense of co-created solutions builds that mutuality. And the third principle is that co-managed and maintained, that collective responsibility leads to greater sustainability. So each must bear responsibility for sustaining common assets and as well as shared interests. There is not in the history of the world any enterprise or any state or civilization that has grown without being impelled by a clear culture, a clear sense of being, of becoming, and of belonging. Think about Americans talking about making America great again. This is a multiplicity of very diverse people who were taken from colonies and dumped in America. They found Native Americans whom they displaced at a great cost. And yet all these people, all those diversities, whether they're Italians, they're Jews, they're Irish, they talk of building this culture that has impelled how they engage the rest of the world. The rest of the world engages you as an entrepreneur based on where you come from, not purely on the basis of your skill. The rest of the world engages you within your own locale and invests in you based on your level of self-belief and self-confidence. And that therefore, given the size of our countries, they are economically non-viable as single entities, no matter how outstanding their performance may be in GDP terms. It therefore means that without aggregating our collective value, creating value chains that are beneficial to us in a mutually inclusive way, that's what we call in Pan-Africanism unity, regional integration. If you don't have that collective approach, you'll be nitpicked by China, by Kuwait, by Iran. And for instance, you see the one country, Iran or Russia, calling all our leaders, Russia, Africa. How is it that one country has a summit with a continent with 1.3 billion people and 59 nations? It's the lack of self-belief, the lack of understanding of our own value. What is that value? Notwithstanding the fact that we have countries with over 400 ethnic groups, that we are so diverse religiously, so diverse culturally, and even linguistically, we have one shared destiny. And that destiny is that the rest of the world always treated us as their property, that they could come, take away as they please from Africa. And we have one common destiny. Our development requires that we share resources, requires that we share solutions, requires that we harvest our collective identity for our collective self-development and sustainable self-development so that we become a voice in the rest of the world. If we come together, for example, at the moment without developing, our collective economy may be smaller than the GDP of California, or sometimes some of the firms like Elon Musk's firms. But if we come together and we look at value adding to our goods, we look at creating regional and national value chains, that is the essence of Pan-Africanism, self-reliant and mutually self-reliant growth. That means nationalism, which confines you into a colonially created nation state, makes you non-viable politically, non-viable socially, non-viable economically. Any right-thinking African that wishes to become a critical player in the globe must first become a critical African. If you are a lizard in Africa, you can't be a crocodile in the global market. And it is as simple as that thinking. A successful African business is a business whose values, whose approach and mode of production, whose accumulation criteria and approach is not inconsistent with the values of where that business comes from. Only unsuccessful business are those which make super profits and have no soul, that make super profits have no reference to the environment, that make one individual obscenely wealthy and has no benefit to the collective, the humanity, that cannot outlive the moment of that super wealthy entrepreneur. A successful African business harvests what I refer to as the quintessential lesson of the village: shared values, shared wealth, and also it develops its context so that it does not win alone. And that's the issue, really, that success is not measured on the basis of net profit. It's measured on the basis of a combination of net impact, net profit, and the culture that you bring that's able to replicate and reproduce in a sustainable way. Otherwise, what you have is a copycat of an American or European business. The African way requires a dialogic approach, outcome approach, intergenerational approach. So you create an entire new culture of doing things that builds confidence, that develops where you are. It's possible to have people making super profits and then leaving half their time in Dubai because they have not built healthcare here, leaving half their time elsewhere because they have not built infrastructure. Just the path from their office to the home is so terrible. Living in fear of criminals who are increasing because they have not invested in creating employment, the things that build the ecosystem of success. Otherwise, we should not conflate, not in Africa, super profits with success. Individual brilliance that's seasonal with success. It's about building businesses that last, building businesses that are great, and their greatness is derived from the principles of the village. I think there is a radical paradigm shift informed by three things: being deliberately strategic, being intentional, and number three, if you like, being informed. The one thing we must not do, I'll come to what we must do, is sell Africa on the basis of raw materials, of flora and fauna. Come and see the big, come and invest in money. Partly because the greatness of Africa is in its human capital. If you represent Africa not as a net value place, but as a net extraction place, then you are misrepresenting Africa. If you represent Africa purely as an opportunity for outsiders, you are misrepresenting Africa. If you represent Africa, however, as a potential solution, because this is the mindset that African SMEs, this is the mindset that African entrepreneurs need to have. Every local idea, from the telephone to the mobile phone to the light to the aeroplane, was once a local idea. Is the self-belief that says, if I go out looking for capital and investment, I am not looking for charity. I am not opening myself and my continent to exploitation. I am not only seeing solutions as coming from outside into the continent. I'm going out there looking where possible for technology transfer without compromising intellectual property rights of what we're developing. I'm going out there perhaps looking for opportunities to invest in those other countries. I mean, gone are the days in this world where SMEs should only think that some European or Asian or Latin American will come and invest in our businesses to grow them. I think we must be getting capital so that we're able to get to invest in those economies as well. So the representation of Africa must be multidimensional. Multidimensional in the way we represent African humanity, we represent African confidence, we represent African collectivity. But you can't represent what you don't know. And the danger with most of our people is that the creation under colonial rule of tribal trust lands or Bantustans created a Bantustan mentality so that we don't know beyond what the colonialists wanted to know, which is the confines of our national boundaries. The opportunity of this moment with technological advances, with the network platform such as been created by this Big Baraza, it's important to learn each other. It's important to understand opportunity and leverage. It's important to also understand how we network in order to engage outsiders so that there's no race to the bottom. Someone is going to Burundi, someone from Kenya, someone from Malawi, competing for external capital. Of course you'll be exploited. So that representation has to be united, has to be collective, and with a clear understanding of the spectra within the value chain and of certain things that we're able to do. So I always say to people, I run a Pan-African consultancy. I have people in Senegal, I have people in Mauritania, I have people in Ethiopia, in Kenya and elsewhere. And I always say, if there is an opportunity, it cannot be done by people from one country only, because it would be disastrous to harvest only unidirectional knowledge from one context. Our diversity is what makes us strong. We are very strong. So if you represent a weak Africa, you're not representing Africa. You are representing your appetite to make profit and live a European type life. If it is about development of Africa and becoming a genuine player in the global economy, you have to shift as an entrepreneur. You have to shift as an African. Your skin color is one badge. The minute you arrive, they don't think that you are competent, you are capable. Even if you come from the best universities and work for the biggest firms, they may not think you're honest. So instead of grappling and struggling to prove individual credibility, do scale. I always tell people, whether they're in business, in sports, or in arts and culture, establish mastery over what you do and excellence in the execution of the small thing that you are doing. Mastery means amass as much knowledge about what you are doing. We often panic at not having capital, but our biggest handicap is not knowing sufficiently enough, not doing enough research to understand our field, the competition that's out there, and the possibilities that are there. So I would say to that person, you can be, but establish mastery. And number two, network. It is very important that sometimes capital follows ideas, and that's oftentimes actually. And people in the village, I said, we follow relationships. Build relationships first. Because without a diverse set of relationships, of people who are doing things similar that you reach out to, you are unlikely to crawl out of a village or a city even. The people who in this conference were talking about their success, they may have talked about their ingenuity. They may have talked about the deployment of technology, but the one constant in all of them, and amongst all of them, is relationships. The networks they were able to build open doors to accessing markets, accessing capital, and also growing. But I think the person in a remote village or county needs much more than themselves. Those of us who work for development finance institutions or assistant need to know risk capital sometimes is better for people in remote areas than traditional capital that we make available. Risk capital means we believe that you will succeed. It is possible that you will fail. We're willing to take the risk with you. And these times are characterized by diversity, unpredictability, ambiguity, and phenomenal opportunity. And the critical challenge is how to survive the tides of exogenous and endogenous shocks. There will be winners and losers. You know, there will be unfair competition. There will be dumping from some. There will be the question of competitiveness and corruption, the governance of the whole ecosystem. It essentially means that we're dealing with much more than business factors. We're dealing with policy. We're dealing with politics. We're dealing with culture. Amongst and within our countries, the culture of doing business is different. So as we talk about networking across countries and cultures, business culture, an African business culture needs to emerge that's mutually accountable, but that's mutually sustainable amongst us. And we have to be impelled by two principles: do no harm. And it's important because it's possible for SMEs from Egypt, from Kenya, from Nigeria, and the other big countries, and South Africa, to do well in this context. And then they become or think they are the measure of how well the Continental Free Trade Agreement or some other framework is performing. The selfless understanding that a person in Burundi, in Central African Republic, a person in the small island states, requires us to do much more than compete with them, but to make available some of the platforms that we're building in the better performing countries is key. Otherwise, what we will have is we'll replicate the problem we're trying to solve with the AFCFTA, which is dominance by Europe, by Asia and co, onto the continent, and will create hostility. And we don't want, that's why the principles of the village are key. It's commonwealth based on shared values and with a commitment to do no harm, but to also assuming collective responsibility based on differentiated but equitable input by everybody. Thank you. Brian Tamuka Kagoro.
So my name is Dr. Masi Nyanchama, and we run an imaging consultancy firm located in Kiambu town that's called KDS Imaging, from the name Kiambu Diagnostic Imaging Services, and we rebranded recently to KDS Imaging. First of all, who thought we'd have a pandemic that hit so hard? And running the business was on so many different facets, right? You have the psychological angle, because we're in healthcare. It means that even the people working within the business are at risk of the diseases, all right? So it meant working with a skeleton staff. The other thing is access to the equipment. For example, if you have equipment breakdowns, usually within 72 hours, you already have it shifting. But remember now that the cargo cargo flights were stopped. So if you lose or if you have a broken spare part and you need to import, what used to take you 3 days to get into the country takes you 3 weeks. So you not only lose current business when the machine is down, but you also lose future business. People got scared of going to the hospital. So if they're scared of going to the hospital, guess what happens? Then they don't want to be seen. And the ones that you see are coming late, meaning that had you caught them earlier, then perhaps you'd have been better off in helping them. Because we run a business that also helps people. It's not just about the money. So you find because healthcare, people could not afford, a lot of people had lost jobs. So if they were on insurance, now they're cash payers, they're paying out of pocket, the economy is not doing well. So you're having also people not being able to afford healthcare. And that's why you're like, you wish that they could find a way that healthcare would actually be more affordable. Oh, they've been awesome. Yeah, Archer Digital have been awesome. I think I stumbled on them. It was rather serendipity. I met, I think, Alex online, and I think he was making a presentation. And then, of course, they came and assessed our business. And it was not only Archer Digital, there was also Alternate Doors Consulting on the human resource. Yeah, so it's not just their contribution to the business, but they also enable you to see the business from a different angle. And the other thing that with the pandemic is being able to, when you have a business, like having a car and driving a car, when you get out of the car and look at it from an external view, then you're able to pick out what's wrong with it than when you're just constantly driving it. So basically working on the business rather than in it. Yeah.
Wow, what a session we had with Mr. Kagoro, and talking about Pan-Africanism, talking about, the Commonwealth based on shared values. It seemed to be, again, in a sense, serendipity. What we just said about emancipating ourselves. How can one country, Russia, summon an entire continent, that was such great conversation, and thank you, Kagoro, for doing that with us. We've come to the end of this conference, and just as we come to a close, I want us to be able to talk to a couple of Sandbox experts and just have them help us just hear what we've had. And I want you to tell me, what have you had in the last 2 days? What has been striking for you? What are you taking out of this Big Baraza? Is it that we can go to Africa? Is it that we need to shout about ourselves? Is it that we can have this Commonwealth based on shared values? What are you taking home with you? Please put it in the discussion group. I'm just waiting for an upload to happen so we can get into the next session. It will be the last, what will be really just the last session of just unpacking some of the things we've had, and then we can close this Big Baraza and start on the process for many other small mini Barazas. So just stay tight, but let me hear what you've had and just keep it on the discussion page going on right here.